What's going on, everybody? How's everybody doing today? That good, huh? Cool. Well, I'll usually wait a minute or two for everybody to jump in, and then we'll jump right into the exciting market. Anybody have any stories that they want to share or any questions before we get started? Heather, I think you're not muted, so I'm gonna mute you. Actually, I can't mute you.
You want to mute me?
You don't. I'm muted now. Now I'm muted. So, all right, cool. Well, I'm gonna give one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get rolling here. Yeah, so I'll get started by just, I guess, introducing myself. I think most of you probably already know who I am, but my name's Troy Marsh. I'm out of the Dublin, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus, KW office, and been in the business since 2004. So got to experience the joys of 2007, 8 through 12 or 13. And I think that gives me a little bit of a unique perspective into what's happening right now. And certainly at the same time, this is pretty much completely different than back then. So we're all doing this together, in this together. And so my goal of this class, which I do every single month on I think it's the third Monday of the month, is just to let you guys know the most recent updates, and also to give you my opinion on kind of forecasting where we're headed from here. Obviously, the markets are all different. Real estate definitely is local. So we'll start with the national kind of overview news and then dive into the Central Ohio news for those of you that are here in Columbus. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I would say definitely feel free to interrupt by either raising your hand, putting stuff in the chat, or just unmuting and asking a question. And I'll be happy to respond or let you know if that's coming later in the slide deck. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the presentation now.
He does upload these slides. Mama! You're unmuted. Oh, sorry.
Let's see, why am I not? The Zoom buttons are like right over top of everything. So
Troy, you upload these too, right? Or should
yep,
we?
I'll throw these. Yeah, or if you want to just email me, I can have my assistant send them over. That's actually probably the best way to do it. I'll throw my my email in the chat.
Thank you.
And then you guys can just email me for slide deck. All right, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're just going to talk about market trends as we do normally. So interest rates, inflation. I'm going to do a little bit. I added a few slides actually after I did this. So we're going to talk a little bit about rental prices and also building inventories. So we'll get into some extra stuff at the end. So active listings. Definitely the increase that we saw kind of through April to July has leveled off. That's true both nationally and locally. Although the trend is still slightly there, we should expect to see as we move into probably this month and certainly into next month, if seasonality has finally reemerged post-COVID. Hopefully we're post-COVID. You know, the COVID outbreaks, for lack of a better phrase, kind of interrupted our normal selling season. And so it created a little bit of unique seasonality, or really it kind of took away some of the seasonality that we had But it seems like we're probably, just based on the trends so far, moving back into the seasonal time where active listings will drop off as we move into winter time from where they are right now. Now, if we see those either stay the same or go up, then that will definitely indicate that things are getting worse in terms of the market conditions. So we'll definitely be looking at that. But the last point I want to give on the active listings count, and this is true in almost every market, I believe, is that we tend to look at numbers year over year. And the reality is that we have to look at 2021 as an anomaly, and really kind of 2020 as well. You know, what happened over the last year and a half or 2 years is not normal. As indicated here, I mean, for those of you that were in the business in 17, 18, 19, I wouldn't call those years, you know, strong buyers markets. And yet, you know, we're still well towards the seller side of those years. And so, you know, we have to put everything into perspective. We're definitely not going to see 2021 numbers again, probably for the next couple years or maybe longer. But it also doesn't mean that we're going immediately back to 2008 numbers either. So we'll see that as a common theme here. This is the one thing that I think pending sales definitely showing nationally, you know, a pretty big decline. We're also seeing it here locally, not quite as strong as nationally, but definitely happening. And that's, you know, as we'll get into later, in my opinion, largely due to interest rates. New listings are also down, and frankly, the new listings are actually offsetting the drop in pending sales and solds, because we have fewer new listings. And so when you have less listings coming on the market, even though we're selling less, we're actually not making nearly as many inventory gains as we would had we seen new listings continue at the same clip that they had been. So you can see that we're actually in the new listings category, we're well below actually all of the last 5 years. And so again, that's going to impact, assuming that most people on this call are real estate agents, but anybody that, you know, that makes money, whether it be mortgage brokers, whether it be real estate agents whose income depends on sold homes, obviously the amount of available listings is definitely declining along with those sales. Days on market are continuing to go up. Again, you know, it looks dramatic and feels somewhat dramatic maybe, but at the same time, even last year in the great year of 2021, we still saw this kind of like U-shaped curve to the days on market. As we move into the fall and winter time, we just tend to see days on market bump. The only year that trend was really not there was that 2020, because that was really impacted by COVID, by the shutdowns. So now if this days on market shoots up past 2017, 18, 19 here over the next couple months, then that will be something, again, that we'll want to keep an eye on. But still, right now, we're still in a very good position compared to historical trends. It just feels like a major shift because of where we just were. Median prices, definitely we see that the peak for pricing happened in June. But if we look down here to previous years, that's actually not abnormal. We definitely have seen the largest decline over the last 5 years from the peak, but that still puts us nationally through September at 13.9% compared to last September. So again, we're going to be looking for that trend line to kind of level out as it has the last couple of months. And so if that trend continues to just slowly decline, I would consider it to be kind of a new trend line and just, you know, what we would normally expect. A lot of sellers for sure, but maybe some agents don't realize that typically we do see a pricing peak on an annual basis, kind of in this May, June timeframe. And then due to dropping demand throughout the year, through the fall and winter, we usually do see a median list price decline. Some of that is due to the fact that a lot of the higher priced homes are in school districts, and so they're impacted, by that seasonality. But also it's just, even when you look at a price per square foot, month over month, you typically do see declines through the fall and winter. And then once we hit around the March timeframe, at least here in Columbus, we tend to see that jump back up. Price reductions, definitely a trend. Obviously, price reductions are significantly higher than they were last year or in 2020. Still kind of the middle of the pack, but nearing some 5-year highs with the price reduction percentage. So I think this price reduction, in terms of the percentage of those reductions, can be a little bit misleading, and we'll see. But I think one of the causes of this has been that, we as agents, we tend to meet with sellers, weeks, sometimes even months ahead of when they actually go on the market. So I think we're seeing a little bit of agents not going back and having a tough conversation with the sellers, or the sellers being a little bit hard-headed with regards to reducing the price down to a number that's reasonable based on the current market versus what it may have been like when they first met with somebody in June or July. So that'll remain to be seen, as to whether or not, we see a sharper and sharper increase. If we go on historical trends, we should see a drop in price reductions. But a lot of that, again, is caused by seasonality. So it's not necessarily indicative. If we see this sharp drop off here historically, and then we keep seeing an increase again, the next couple months are going to be really telling with regards to how the market reacts, because we know how it typically reacts from a seasonal perspective. And so if we continue to see some of these negative trends continue in the way that they have over the last 2, 3, 4 months, the same way that they were before, then that will be a little bit more alarming. So local market in Columbus here. So one thing that I didn't have a lot of space on here, but one thing I want to point out, so these dark green lines here are the number of sold properties in a given month, and the light green are the number of active properties in a given month. And for the last couple of years, really, we've seen that the number sold in a given month be above the number active. And this last, in September, we had the first month in quite some time where, as a market, we had more active properties than sold in a given month. So we will definitely be keeping an eye on this. And obviously that impacts the months of inventory, which we'll get to in a second. But new listings are down, again, 15%, like we talked about. Active listings up 30% year over year. Solds are down 24%. So this gives a specific number to it, but you can see that the solds are down 24%, which is a huge deal, but the new listings are also down almost 16%. So really, we're only adding about 8% to the market, even though the solds are down 24%. So it's an interesting dynamic that will continue. If we continue to see new listings suppressed at the level that they are now, I think we'll still continue to see homes and days on market stay relatively low, because the reality is there's a certain number of buyers that just have to buy. There's people relocating, there's people getting divorces, there's people having babies that are just completely out of space. And so all of those life events happen, and they're not going to stop happening. Year-to-date numbers, I think, are a little bit less valuable in this instance. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but we're seeing similar trends. I would say the biggest thing to point out, again, is the difference between the solds and the new listings. We're just not, the active listing percentage increase is large because we were so low last year. But in terms of like physical listings that we can go show and sell, there just still aren't that many on the market. You can see the difference between September of this year and last year, and there's still only 800 more houses on the market. And in Central Ohio, we sell between 35 and 40,000 a year. So an increase of 800 is really not a huge deal. So local days on market, again, you can see the trends. So even last year, in what was an amazing market, we had days on market go up during the winter months and then come back down. So again, we would expect this trend to happen. It happened last year and it's happening again this year. And so we'll see. Months of supply finally jumped over 1 here in Central Ohio, which is significant. I mean, it increased by 0.3 of a month. And so that is the biggest increase. We haven't seen those types of fluctuations really at all. So last month was a big deal for that. So again, we're going to look for these trends. 1 month doesn't equal a trend, but certainly the trend has been moving in that direction. So we'll see. One other thing, I think I've mentioned it already today, though, is that we're still only at 1.2 months of inventory or supply, and a balanced market, according to National Association of Realtors, is 4 to 6 months. So we're definitely not in a strong buyer's market by any means. But again, the trends do matter. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. Average sales price did decline month over month here in Columbus. But year over year, the average sold price is still up 9.6%. And this is one of those reasons. The amount of equity that almost all home buyers have currently is one of the main reasons why this is different than 2008. So interest rates, I actually did not switch the slide out, so I'm going to keep going. But rates basically right now nationally from an average perspective are above 7%, which is very significant. So if you were to get a loan at the beginning of the year, you would have been close to 3%. And so if you are getting a $600,000 loan right now compared to the beginning of the year, you're paying almost $1,500 more per month in principal and interest, which is very, very significant. And frankly, I think one of the biggest reasons why the market is slowing is because of interest rates. It's not a lack of demand. Inflation numbers, unfortunately, still continue to be an issue. The Fed is making decisions almost solely based on these numbers. So until we start to see these numbers subside, I think it's going to be difficult for the Federal Reserve to stop raising rates. Now, obviously, as we've talked about many times, the Fed funds rate, which is what the Fed actually raises, is not directly tied to the 30-year fixed mortgage, but certainly does have an impact on the overall rate environment. The other thing that the Fed is doing currently is they've been over the last several years buying, specifically during COVID, buying mortgage-backed securities in order to essentially create more demand than really was there. And so that had pushed interest rates down. Well, now in combination with raising interest rates, they're also selling mortgage-backed securities that they own. They owned almost $9 trillion worth of mortgages. And so they're selling those off their balance sheet right now, which is having probably an even larger impact on mortgage rates than the Fed funds rate. So that's something that, in my opinion, they should have started doing last year when the market was really hot. But, obviously they I think are a lot smarter than me. So hopefully they know what they're doing. All right, so those are kind of the numbers. The last thing I want to talk about, which I think is a huge deal for those of you on the call, I commend you for being on the call. Obviously, I appreciate you trusting me as a source of information, but I also think, in times of uncertainty, people really want to deal with facts, because the emotion of the moment is fear, and fear typically causes people to be paralyzed. And so in this moment, having facts to back up what you're telling people and explaining, hey, this is the reason, these numbers are the reason why we need to price more aggressively. These numbers are the reason why we can't do the same thing that your neighbor did in the spring. And using the information to make it less about emotion and more about, okay, that makes sense type of conversation, I think will really help you as we enter into the slower time of the year, which typically, at least here in Central Ohio, is the slower time of the year. So I'm going to encourage you guys to continue leaning into this and figuring out how you can present yourself as a local market expert. So one thing I wanted to jump into for just a quick second is, if you guys haven't been working with any buyers over the last month or month and a half since rates went way up to 7, one of the things that is a big conversation point are adjustable rate mortgages, which specific types called subprime during 2008 definitely led to a lot of the problems that we had. The adjustable rate mortgages, or ARMs as they're commonly called, are definitely, they haven't really been priced all that much better than a 30-year fixed, which is why they haven't really been used. From some conversations I've had with some local lenders, though, it sounds like some of the lenders are going to be coming out, and some already have, but I think you're going to continue seeing the demand for adjustable rate mortgages at a lower rate increase. And so it's something that if you have not had any conversations lately with your loan officer of choice, I would strongly encourage you to have that conversation and make sure that you understand what's going on in the lending market, because there are likely going to be a lot of fast changes here over the next 6 months, given where interest rates are currently. And you're going to have to get creative in order to get buyers into properties that they thought that they could afford, and now they're finding out maybe they can't. The other way to use lending, which again, we haven't dealt with this in a couple years, but is seller paid closing costs. And can you use a different loan product to sell your listing? So one of my business coach owns a mortgage company, and one of the things that they're doing at a really high level right now is using 2-1 buy downs, where basically you buy down your interest rate for year 1 and year 2, and then it goes to market rates in year 3. The concept behind that, though, is twofold. Number one, the cost of, so the example he gave me was on a $600,000 property. The 2-1 buy down cost about $15,000 to pay for. And that 2-1 buy down saved the borrower, I think, like $1,200 or $1,300 a month. And that savings, in order for the buyer to have that level of savings through a price reduction at market rates, the seller would have had to drop their price by $85,000. And so if you're a listing agent and you can offer that better rate, that is a marketing opportunity. If you're a buyer's agent and you understand, hey, buyer, we believe that rates are probably going to come back down in the next couple of years, you want to make sure that you can afford the worst case scenario, which is that full market rate. But in the short term, you might have an opportunity to save a pretty significant amount of money on your payment over the next 1 to 2 years. And then if rates come back down, then we can refinance. So those are the types of conversations I'm going to encourage you guys to be having. That's what's going to create a professional in this type of a market. You're going to have to be able to have those conversations because people are scared and they want to know that the people that are representing them know what they're doing. So if you don't feel like you can have those types of conversations, definitely go talk to your loan officer. Again, using Central Ohio numbers, but I think in most areas, this applies also. Again, our supply is still very, very low. Here in Central Ohio, according to a recent newspaper article here, the region is currently building 8,000 to 9,000 homes on average per year over the last 10 years. And according to the report, we really need 14,000 to 19,000. So we're basically building somewhere around between 40 and 60% of the homes that we need. And so every single year that we're doing that, it's just making the problem worse. Unfortunately, I think that this current or pending recession is definitely going to put us even further in the hole with regards to supply. The millennial generation, which for a while some people thought wouldn't be interested in owning homes, is now, if they're not this year, I think they're projected to be next year the largest group of home buyers. They are the largest generation currently alive, and so they are starting to buy, and that's one of the reasons why supply is as low as it is because a lot of people had baked into the numbers that they would never buy, which is really interesting, but that's conversation for another day. But they are buying, which is causing the previously disclosed estimates to be well below what's been needed. And then here in Central Ohio, if you're on the Zoom for Central Ohio, that 14 to 19,000 per year of inventory was also pre-Intel and pre-Honda plant, which if you didn't hear last week, Honda announced that they're building the battery plant that they intend to use to supply all of North America with electric vehicle batteries from this plant just in Fayette County, I believe. So, and that's going to be built here in the next couple of years. So that's going to need more construction workers. And then also, I think 2,200 jobs coming in there. So, and they all need a place to live. So all of those things are definitely leading to more challenges. The last thing that's going to, I think, continue to keep real estate purchasing in the conversation despite higher rates is the fact that rent rates have continued to go up. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, this is a national rate. If you go on realtor.com and look at their data, you can actually see, like, I think Columbus was up 8.6 or 9% year over year in terms of average or median rental. And so they have a list of all the major cities if you're interested in that. But you can see that the year over year increases have been as much as 18%. Now they've come back down to nationally around, like, what is that, 7.5%. But rents are still much, much higher than they were before. And so that's making renting versus buying due to interest rates just still not make a ton of sense. And I think because of the low building supply, we're going to probably continue to see rents increasing, maybe not at the pace that they were earlier this year, but they will increase. And this is a slide I've had on here for a couple of months, but I think they're great talking points for you guys, because I think the general public has a short memory, and the most recent recession was a housing-based recession that saw massive decline in pricing. And so the general public thinks that that's what happens in every recession, which is absolutely not the case. And here are the reasons why this recession is not like the last. Most homeowners have massive amounts of equity, very large amounts of equity. Rental rates have increased, which we just talked about, which sometimes makes renting not less expensive than buying, even on the monthly basis. The types of loans that were given back in 2003 to 2007 were significantly more risky, with as much as 25% of the loans being subprime, meaning they were given to borrowers who typically would not have qualified. That is absolutely the opposite of what is happening right now. If anything, things need to loosen up a little bit with regards to qualification, because I think, in my opinion, some of the qualifiers for loans are just ridiculously strict and don't make a lot of logical sense. But I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon, because the banks are panicked. And so they're going to tend to even swing more conservative during times like this, as well as the supply of money, which is probably a whole nother Zoom. Inventories remain at historical lows, which we talked about. And then also most homes are still occupied by their owners, and we all have to live somewhere. And so I think what we'll continue to see if rates stay at this level for any period of time, is we'll continue to just see the number of new listings decreasing because people aren't going to be willing to sell their 3% rate to go get a 7% rate. So that's going to require the lenders to get more creative, or us as agents to get more creative with how we get people to move. And yet there still will be people that move because life still happens. And sometimes the interest rate is not the most important thing. So that's all I've got. Anybody have any questions or comments? Would love to get some feedback from you guys on what you're seeing in your markets. Anything different than what we've talked about here that you guys would like to share?
It's all good.
What's that, Heather?
I said it was good.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if nobody has anything, I'll be back here next month. You can always feel free to reach out in between. And thank you guys all for coming. Email me if you want the slide deck.
Thanks, Troy.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Troy.
Thanks.